to it. So essentially we're going to approach this as if we were creating a wireframe for an initial design we were doing. So we're just going to block out the main structure of this dialogue that we can see. With the main container shapes up there, we're just going to start adding a little bit of color and taking a look at the line detail. So this UI is really straightforward actually. It may look like there's quite a lot going on in it, and like technically there is, but the art side of things, it is very straightforward. And like before we know it, once we've set up these early steps, we're well on our way to, you know, capturing the essence of the UI. So as I mentioned, just laying out these elements here. So, you know, this little progress bar, the search box, you know, the text. There's quite a lot happening in this header area, which, you know, you don't always have. Like usually headers, they're sort of, you know, quite basic. You'll have the close button or, you know, just a heading really. Maybe a subheading, but this is, yeah, quite decked out to be honest. So if you take a look at the text that I set there, have a look at what the font name's called, and I managed to find it out by going on the New World website, and I right-clicked on the website and inspected the code, and like luckily for us, the headings that they use on the New World website are the same, if not identical to what they use in the game, so I was able to track down that font. Actually a free Google font, which is awesome for what we needed, so I'll make sure I link that in the description, or you'll just be able to find it by just searching for the name. I won't say it because it's a completely random name it seems. And the secondary font is yeah, also a free font as well, so it was, yeah, really easy to track down these two fonts. So that's just something to bear in mind, you know, if you're ever trying to figure out what a font is that you've seen on the website, just right click and inspect the code, and usually in the style sheet you'll be able to find what the initial fonts are and what the fallback fonts are as well. So if you can't find exactly the thing that they're using, the fallbacks are usually close enough, and more often than not it's just Arial, if you can believe it. It seems like yeah, we used to use Arial when we did web development because, you know, you're always guaranteed to have that on the user system as a fallback, I think. So yeah. So right now we've fleshed out the core elements at the top, and this is looking like a very sort of basic wireframe design at the moment. But now we're going to start getting into the, you know, the meat of it. So I'm starting with the icon design, and yeah, this is the timer design. So that's essentially, it is what it is. It's just a series of, you know, simple shapes and strokes. But what I've done is I've created a smart object out of it. And the reason why is one of the work processes that I follow is using smart objects and layer comps in Photoshop is a really handy way of storing an entire stack of icons or anything that you would want to use interchangeably, you know, or select. So it's almost like a mini design system, or you know, a master file for icons. And I've found in the past, yeah, it works quite well, but only if you keep it updated. Layer comps can be a little bit fiddly at times, so it's just something to think about, and definitely something to try. So now we're creating the weight icon, and as with most icons, these are all very basic, and yeah, there's not much work involved here, which is kind of handy for a video like this, because at this point, you know, icon design, hopefully you've already had a little bash at some of your favorite icons that you've seen. And the star within Photoshop is just created using the polygon tool, which is really handy. They've added some extra features to it as well, which allows us to easily add rounded corners and to play about with the overall shape of it, which is, yeah, long overdue, but finally we've got something that helps us with these simple shapes really. Now we're going to work on this pyramid one. Once again, a very basic icon, just removing the stroke, and then we're just going to chop into it. And before you know it, those icons are pretty much done. I have no idea what this icon's called actually, so I sort of struggled with it. So just put a random thing for now. Cool, so now we're just going to take a look at the layer comps. Now we've set up the main icons, we can start to create the layer comps. And essentially what we're doing for each icon, you're going to create a layer comp. You're going to name it consistently so it's easy to sort of track down and find. And then with each layer group that's on the layer comp you set up, you just want to make sure that it's visible. And now you'll notice within the main design we've got here in the properties panel, we can use the different properties to target the layer comps specifically, which allows us to essentially just have one instance of a file and allows us to quickly, swap the icons out, for what we need really. So one thing that I should have done at the start was just set up my icon canvas and done it that way, but when I'm usually flowing through these videos, it's all a little bit sort of cathartic, and I'm just, going through it and sort of finding my way, without too much prior planning. And I think that's really nice because it kind of frees your mind just to sort of explore and play about and come across things that you might not have realized before, and better ways, or different processes and stuff like that. So I do encourage you to not be too mechanical with the process and to try and figure things out, and in sort of a feeling sense. But yeah, this is probably the better way of doing it, which is to set up your square canvas, because ultimately icons are exported to the power of 2, like I've mentioned previously, and that's something that you might want to set up yourself. So yeah, just hopping in and tweaking things and making sure the scales of the icons are correct, or as close as possible really. So right now we're just going to start to arrange things, get something relatively close, scale these icons down, etc. Yeah, it's looking quite balanced. Just going to apply a colour to these. There's a few ways you could do it, but yeah, a colour overlay is probably the quickest for this video. And there's no real harm in it, especially if there's, sort of, you've got quite a basic setup like what we're looking at here. Just setting a text for the search field. Just going to drop that down to lowercase, capitalized. I'm just going to tweak this progress bar, or the actual fill aspect, a little bit, just so it's closer to the height of the reference that we're using. So what I need to do is just tidy up this layer stack here. So I'm just going to fast forward through this part of it and yeah, just get things a little bit more tidy. And we're moving on to the fun bit. So what we've done is we've taken the header area and we've added a layer mask to it. And as you can sort of see, we've just done a quick test of just painting out some of that grunge detail. But obviously I want to take you through the creation of your own custom grunge brush. There's tons out there, but learning the process for yourself, or a process for it, is definitely beneficial and actually quite fun, because you're not always going to find exactly what you want out there. So if you know how to create your own brushes in Photoshop, yeah, it's just going to give you more freedom to sort of fully express what you are hoping for. So as with everything, we want to be doing these types of textures and sort of, grunge effects using layer masks, essentially. The days of when you would, just paint directly and sort of erase, the like a bitmap rectangle or square, you don't want to be doing that anymore. You want the freedom to have your source shape and then to chip away at it using layer masks. And that just allows you to, scale this even bigger if you wanted to. And it's a better process, really. So we're using the default brush here, and I actually plugged my Wacom tablet in for this, but I have done in the past created grunge brushes just with the mouse. So if you don't have a tablet, you don't necessarily need one for this type of work, but it could be beneficial if you do find that you go down more of the painterly sort of route with your UI art, or if you have a project that calls for it. So yeah, just all we're doing is just trying to get a little bit of like randomness and visual interest, really. So what we're going to do is we go to edit and then define brush, and then you name it something that makes sense to you. I'll just leave it as it is. And as you can sort of see, we've got our grunge brush and we're painting on the mask. So in order to paint on the white mask, we need a black brush. So just make sure that you're doing that. And we're just going to chip away at this. And there's no real exact science to it. We're not trying to match exactly what they have, down to, the tiniest bit of noise or anything like that, or grunge. But we do want to capture the essence of it. So we'll just continue to sort of chip away. And one thing I noticed when I was doing it is just like the background was just way too dark. We needed a neutral background just so we could see the edges of the grunge a little bit more. So what I'm doing is I'm just working my way around the header area here, and I'm just chipping away, taking my time with it, and not really being too precious, but just trying to get a nice silhouette that sort of feels balanced and interesting. And one thing you might find is you might want to actually hop into these brush parameters a little bit further. So that might be something we can take a look at. And sometimes, when you're chipping away, you make a mistake or it doesn't look quite right. And that's the beauty of using the layer masks. You get to, undo that, and it doesn't, it's not permanent. So hopping into the brush settings here, just turning on shape dynamics, playing with the scattering. And this is just going to give us a little bit more randomness. The angle just is always interesting if you're trying to capture that randomness. And as you can sort of see, we're getting some bits and bobs that, it kind of gives you the randomness that sends your idea down a route that you might not have managed to achieve yourself. You might have tried to control it too much, and then this, ragged, rough texture just becomes too controlled, too refined, and the essence of, or the beauty in these types of parchment or torn paper designs is it has to feel natural. So by adding a little bit of randomness in the brush settings definitely helps free you from trying to design it too much. So as you can sort of see, I'm just pushing around the main container shape here and just trying to chip into it, sort of figure out what's working and stuff like that. And one of the things to think about is if you do make a mistake and you need to, sort of mask that out or erase what you've done, you just press an X on the keyboard and that's just going to flip those two swatches that you've got there. So this was an interesting shape that I did. It actually was created using the mouse. So, stacking up these grunge brush effects, definitely goes a long way. And they don't always have to sort of match stylistically, because we are looking for randomness. If you think about it from the perspective of, this is a piece of paper or parchment, and it's worn on the edges because it's been taken in and out of a folder. So you're definitely going to get edge tear and edge wear and stuff like that. But what if, you accidentally scraped it with your nail, for example, or, a pen? You would get a different type of texture treatment. So you're just trying to kind of put your head in the context of the story that you're trying to tell. And through that, it kind of gives you the ideas which allow you to kind of bring it closer to reality without it being too plain and controlled, really. So it's an interesting way to look at things, and I do that a lot with the UIs that I do, especially this type of UI, because like with anything, it's really cool to give things an anchor or a backstory. Even if it's just you who uses it as the reference, it helps sell the idea. And one thing I noticed when I was doing this is just how Photoshop is just non-performant nowadays. I was going around and I was painting with these, and I was just noting that so much the brushes, every time I painted with them, or at any time I sort of really do anything UI related in Photoshop, it just lags quite a lot. And it just goes to show that Photoshop just really isn't, a UI creation friendly tool. Like I've mentioned before, there's no way to do design systems. The closest thing we can get is using libraries, which are really heavy and non-intuitive, or layer comps, which are handy but just a bit of a pain sometimes. But yeah, it's just a bit of a shame. So you'll see that I'm pressing the brackets and stuff to increase my brush size quite a bit, and there's a little bit of lag, just a little bit painful. That part of the process is, and hopefully in the future it becomes easier and smoother to use. But anyway, so aside from the few Photoshop gripes that I have, all we're doing now is just rolling a gradient across the front, just trying to get something relatively close. I probably should have taken the stopper close to the edge, because I've left it quite quite long, but actually it's a bit tighter at the edge if you notice in the reference. But it doesn't really matter too much at this point. It's still, still managed to capture the essence. But as you can sort of see, if you to squint your eyes, the main style of this UI has really come together already. Just chipping away at the page has really brought life to it. So what we're going to do is going to create a quick grunge texture essentially. So we're going to filter, render different clouds, and I'm just going to compress it a little bit using levels. And then we'll go up to edit and we'll define the pattern. You just name it something more sensible than me. And then, we're just going to apply that as a layer style, essentially. But what we'll need to do is we'll probably just duplicate it first, the heading. And we're going to remove the existing style on that. Shall we go for default leaves? Why not? It used to be clouds, but leaves seems to be more popular. But as you can sort of see, within the pattern options there, the pattern we defined now exists in that list. So that's just going to bring even more, wear and tear to it, and yeah, it's really, that's what the foundation of this UI style is. Just going to apply it to the main container. This is really subtle, maybe offset it a little bit, rotate. It just adds something, doesn't it? So I've got this texture that I created in Substance Designer. I think I've showed it in the past, and I'm going to create a pattern from that as well. But first, yeah, obviously resize it because it's massive. Yeah, just create a pattern. And then I'm going to apply that pattern over the top as well of the header, because that's going to give that sort of like water wear and tear a little bit, which is closer to what they've got. You notice they've got some sort of like vertical details going on in terms of that grit. So that's looking quite nice. And we're just refining the colours at this point. That's it. So I needed to add like a little bit more green into it, I think. That's it, and then just stacking up these. The tricky part of this would be if you wanted to implement it into a game engine. If you guys are interested in like actually implementing these types of UIs, it could be something I could add to the list of things we could go through, so you get an idea of the full sort of like production flow, really. But yeah, these types of UIs are quite tricky, because if this is set up to slice and scale, which it probably would be, whoever did it has done a really good job of hiding where those seams are, and you can't really see it. So yeah, it's always an interesting challenge of like, you know, you've got this really nice UI, and now how do I break that down so all of this wear and tear is completely seamless based on how it scrolls and stretches and stuff like that. So at this point, I just selected the smudge brush, and I'm actually just going around the edges a little bit, and I'm just going to try and add a little bit of vertical stretching and blurring. I noticed there was a little bit in this design, and I don't know if it was sort of created by hand or not, or whether, you know, they just started with, you know, a default grunge brush somewhere else, but adding these little bits that sort of break the rigidity of the main silhouette, then this sort of, yeah, helps. Yeah, at this point you can kind of see like, this is the technique, this is, you know, the process you could follow to achieve it. And now we're just moving on to like this midsection. I'm probably not going to do the entire thing, because if you notice, take a look at any of these little categories here, they're just a like instance of each other. So all you need to do is just create one section, so in this case weapons, and then you would just duplicate that and the pattern follows. There are no major changes essentially. The only difference that I can see is the fishing and stone cutting ones. They use round icons. I'm not entirely sure the logic of that, but I'm sure there would be some. And then using the same brush that we created, all we're doing is just chipping away at the edges and just adding a little bit of, yeah, a bit of that distressed vibe really. It's quite straightforward, to be honest. So just dropping the opacity. These icons are really faded, or their values are like really low, so the brightest points of the whites are actually probably about like 70%, it would seem. So I'm just going to pull some icons from this icon set that I created a while back. they seem to match sort of kind of stylistically, at least the swords did. I do have the glints over the top, which we don't see here. But for the example in the video, they're relatively close. And just talking about that, going back to the value thing again, my icons, like the whites, are probably way too white. So just dropping the opacity of the actual icon eye itself obviously lowers those values a little bit and just sort of brings it slightly closer. But I think in the fullness of the creation of like the final assets for this, those icons would be dialed correctly first. And yeah, they would obviously be 100%, sort of transparency. So yeah, but for the example, it's fine. I'm just going through trying to figure out which ones sort of match as close as possible, really. It's mostly the swords and daggers and axes, I think, sort of match this game more than the sort of the more fantasy, stylized ones. And this could be another case for using layer comps in Photoshop, to be honest. These item slots, they're all, quite the same. So maybe it is worth setting layer comps up. And if you're following, maybe that's something you want to try. So if you rewind back to the area where we did the layer comps, use that as a reference and see how you get on with that. Could be interesting. It definitely reduces the manual labor and the having all of these items in the layer stack that you have to sort of manage and control. Instead, you're using the properties and the layer comps options within that. So at this point, we've essentially captured the entire UI. And it's just a case of fleshing out the contents. I'm not going to go too far into it. I'll do one for the cooking section because I know I have some icons that are sort of relevant for that area. Which is actually these icons I painted quite a while ago now. And we've got a herb bowl, a piece of garlic, some ginger. So yeah, I'll just quickly throw these in for us, and we'll get something closer to final, really. I'm just moving these numerals over, and I'll duplicate these for the cooking ones as well. So I'm just trying to pick a few more icons, and yeah, picking the acorn. To be honest, I have no idea what you can make with an acorn. Maybe you can't actually do any type of cooking with an acorn. So I don't know why I dragged that out. I think it just looks quite nice, doesn't it? With the green leaf and stuff like that. But I do, probably think it should go, as it doesn't really make too much sense. And then, select a bay leaf maybe, it'd be quite nice. Let's just drag that one over. And that's it essentially, isn't it? We started off with a very rudimentary wireframe, set up the foundation, and then we created the icons and we set up a little system using layer comps for that, which was interesting. Then we created the main styling using masks on the main components we created. We started chipping away, we defined our own brush, we created some randomness in the brush settings with it. And then we've just carried on with the laying out of the main window that we've got here. And at this point, all I'm doing is just sort of refining a little bit further. And you could, spend a long time doing this if you wanted to, but just capture the essence you're going for and then leave it there, get some feedback on it. But yeah, that's essentially it, and I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. If you did, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you haven't already, and I know a lot of people who watch these videos haven't they haven't subscribed, and it would be awesome if you did. It's really good feedback to have you guys following along, and it does encourage me to create more content. So yeah, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and I'll catch you next time, guys.